May we, the Council of the Town of Bassendean, being mindful of the Code of Conduct, have the integrity and wisdom to consider the matters before us honestly, graciously, and for the greater good of the town. Thank you, everyone.
Well, this is going to be entertaining.
Okay, go. You're okay? Okay, so welcome everyone to the special council meeting. As you'll be aware, this meeting has been scheduled to look at two items, the first of which is the responsible authority report for the Byron petrol station, and the second one being the Surrey Street project. Come on. But before we get on to that, as always, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet. As we know, our town was founded on the lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people, and they have an important part to play in our history, but also in our present. We just want to pay our respects to the traditional owners, past and present. Tonight's meeting is being recorded. It will also be uploaded onto the website. So just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention, especially to members of the public who may like to ask questions, that you will be recorded and it will be made publicly available. So moving on to public question time, there's the opportunity tonight for members of the public to ask questions about items on the agenda. There will also be an opportunity to address council following question time if there's a specific statement that you would like to make. But I would first like to invite anybody who would like to ask a question in relation to the agenda items to raise your hand, and I can call you forward to ask your question. Yes, Mr. Woods.
Tony Wood, 12A Nurstead Avenue, Bassendean. I'd like to speak and ask questions on the Infant Health Centre relocation to Surrey Street. In my opinion, it's a typical staff and council decision that's uncaring, inconsiderate and feeble. I'll advance 3 or 4 reasons why I consider this proposal to be uncaring, inconsiderate and feeble.
Mr. Wood, can I just ask, have you got a question at the moment, or are you just making a statement?
No, I do have questions following my reasons.
Okay.
May I do that? Or would you rather
Yes, please proceed.
I appear at the second
That's fine.
part?
If you've got questions, that's quite fine.
Is the microphone on?
Yes, it is.
Reason 1. Users of the health centre come from all economic stratas, not just the socialist green left groupthink people that have 2 motor vehicles for their household and are paying off their own abode. Users do not all have partners. Where they do have partners, not all can afford a vehicle each. Users can be battling to pay rent, let alone run a vehicle for their exclusive use. The health centre is at least 650 metres from the nearest bus stop. In summer, with temperatures regularly over 35 degrees, it is not good to push a pram on the unsheltered streets. Similarly, in winter, it's not good. The proposal is totally uncaring and inconsiderate of the less well-off users that have to walk or use public transport. Was this 650 metres considered?
So your question is, have we taken into consideration the distance required for
people
for
that
parents?
own vehicles?
We haven't specifically had a discussion around that, Mr. Wood. However, I would suggest that the current location, still there is a walk required from the train station, and this location is still within the town centre. I appreciate, as a young mother myself, maybe not so young anymore, but as a mother myself, that it can be difficult when you're pushing a pram during the heat of the day, but I'm not convinced that this location is a huge barrier for people who may need to use.
Well, in answer to your statement, the distance from the train station is probably about 350 metres.
Mm-hmm.
It's 650 to a bus stop. The distance from the existing location to a bus stop is probably 150 metres. So not everyone comes on the bus or everyone on the train. Some people will walk. Reason 2 for why I consider it inconsiderate. I cannot see where council have consulted the ratepayers in the immediate vicinity. This increased usage will obviously have a detrimental impact on the value of these ratepayers' properties. I'd like to ask whether this was considered and whether you'll be paying compensation for the loss in value to their properties if you go ahead with the relocation.
Okay, so I think your statement that obviously it will have a detrimental effect. I'm not sure that that is actually fact. It possibly would, but I'm not sure that we can assume that's the case. And
you can if you ask any licensed
Mr. Woods,
valuer.
excuse me, I'm speaking. So if you've asked a question, I'd appreciate that you let me answer it. No, we would not be paying compensation because the purpose of this building is to accommodate families and children's services in our community. However, it has been proposed for quite some time to be a community space, so it's not different in that regard, and I don't imagine that it will have a negative impact. In fact, it will enhance the street because the building, which is currently quite run down, will be restored. There'll be some beautification to the gardens. So I think it's not accurate to say that there will obviously be a detrimental effect to people's property values.
Right, the
You've got
valuers
one more question at the moment, Mr. Woods. Thank you.
Well, the valuers I have spoken to say it definitely has impact living next to it or across the road from it. But we'll have to agree to disagree, and obviously council will employ licensed valuers to check this out. Reason 3, the existing location is an easy, covered in part walk for both winter and summer to bus stops and train station. It has convenient access to the air-conditioned library where the mothers, children and babies can rest and be entertained. It is convenient to other health professionals, chemists, doctors, dentists, and convenient to other retail shops. The Surrey Street location is not convenient to anything. I can't see in the papers that convenience was considered or discussed at all, whereas the convenience of the existing location to all the health professionals wasn't considered.
So your question is, do we consider the convenience of the location?
Yes.
So the proposed location at the Surrey Street building is further away from the town centre, but it is still within the town centre, so I don't believe that it was considered to be a barrier to prevent us from using that location for this purpose.
Well,
Mr. Woods, I'm just going to have to ask,
car.
Mr. Woods, so that's your 3 minutes, so I'm going to ask you to sit down and see if anybody else has some questions at this point. No, hold on a moment. If others would like to ask questions, I'll give them the opportunity, and if not, you can come and ask your additional questions. Is there anybody else who would like to ask questions at this point? No? Okay, Mr. Woods, you're free to continue.
Right. One last question. It must be cheaper to do up an old building rather than have to employ specialists to design, etc., the reusage of a heritage building that is 150 years old, give or take. Whilst the work is underway to do up the old building, the health clinic can be accommodated in this room or the Mayor's office, and during this period, council meetings can be held next door. The Mayor could use a meeting room at the library or continue to use Dome for meetings. Saving ratepayers' money seems to be a foreign idea to you. Was it ever considered what the respective costs are of doing up the old building and the new?
So the old building isn't fit for purpose. The size of it is too small. It doesn't accommodate the needs of parents and children in our community. There have been discussions over many years about options for that site, and you may be aware that there have been plans pursued to have a new facility at that particular location, and those plans fell down because of the expense that was involved. Council really would like to see better facilities for our families and children, and there is the project that has been ongoing at Surrey Street for many years now that Council has been committed to, that there has been Lottery West funding allocated to. So the thinking around relocating the infant health clinic to that location was because we were going to be able to provide it more quickly for families, but also that project was going ahead, and we saw that as an excellent opportunity to maximise the use of that facility for a large number of people in our community. I think your suggestions about housing the infant health facility in this building or in the Mayor's office, they're not practical. There are all sorts
as a temporary measure while
No,
you're
I understand that, but there are all sorts of requirements around having sinks and those kind of things. It's not a practical solution.
It could be overcome quite easily, and you know it.
Thank you.
So in other words, you're saying that you do not have a cost of extending and doing up the old building in comparison.
No, so what I've said to you is the old building is not appropriate to do
No,
up.
but
Mr. Wood, if you're going to ask me a
modified.
question, please let me answer it. The old building is not appropriate to do up. We have looked at the options of having a whole new facility there, and it was cost prohibitive at the time. So that's the answer that I can give you at this stage.
Okay, can I see the papers that say the old building cannot be extended and it's not appropriate?
Mr. Wood, there are no papers saying that it can't be extended. I'm sure the staff would be very happy to provide you with the details of some of the previous plans, but that's not what we're considering this evening. Thank you.
Well, thank you, I suppose, for incomplete answers.
All right. So if there's no further questions, we'll move on to statements by members of the public. Is there anybody who would like to make a statement on an agenda item? Okay, thank you. All right, so then moving on, before we go any further with this meeting, as some of you might be aware, tonight's council meeting is the final one that Mr. Jarvis, the CEO, will be with us. Earlier in the year, he announced his intentions to seek other opportunities in the future after serving the town of Bassendean for nearly a decade. So I just want to take the opportunity to say a few words to farewell Bob and to recognise some of the achievements during his leadership over the last 10 years. As many of you would know, those who've worked with him and members of the community, Bob has been a very dedicated employee for the town of Bassendean and a servant to this community. And Bob leaves the town in a better state than he inherited in. And we wish to thank you, Bob, for your contribution in this progress. So just some of the major projects that have been achieved during Bob's tenure. So we saw the development of the first apartments on Old Perth Road. So now there's been 144 that have been built in the town centre, which has added much needed vibrancy to the town of Bassendean. There was the redevelopment of the BIC into the Civic Gardens, which is home to the town's war memorial. There's the redevelopment of the Bassendean Village Shopping Centre, the introduction of the Old Perth Road markets, which have been really well received by the community. The summer movies on the BIC, the floating jetty works at Success Hill, the district playground at Ashfield Reserve, extensions to the Ashfield Community Centre, underground power through Ashfield, and that's just a few. There's many more that Bob has had a significant role in achieving. During Bob's time at the town, there have also been a lot of awards that have been won. So just to give you some idea about some of them, so in 2009, the town won the Perth Biodiversity Milestone Award. 2010, the LGIS Occupational Health and Safety Management System Audit Highly Commended Silver Award. Some of these are a bit of a mouthful. 2010, the ICLEI Oceania Corporate and Community Water Campaign Award. 2013, the Wagga Green Sense Carbon Management and Energy Efficiency Award. 2017, the Waterwise Council Certificate of Endorsement Award, and then in 2018, the Waterwise Gold Council Award. The town also won the Disability Services Commission Count Us In Award in 2009. All category winners in this award were then eligible for the Dr. Louisa Alessandri Award for Excellence, which was the overall winner, and the town was successful in achieving that award as well. The town won a Highly Commended Award for Active Abilities in the Hart Foundation's Local Government Awards in 2010. The Australasian Environmental Law Enforcement and Regulators Network Achievement Awards in 2018, which was the achievement in building the regulatory craft category. So this award was presented when a significant contribution to the environment regulatory profession was evident and where involvement spanned jurisdictional boundaries. Also in 2007, Stormwater WA Awards for Excellence. We won the Excellence in Education category, which was to encourage and celebrate excellence in the innovation, development and completion and management of stormwater projects and the people involved. And I'm sure I've missed some, but that's quite an extensive list of awards that have been achieved during Bob's tenure. So I think everyone would agree that this is quite an outstanding contribution that Bob has made during this time. And Mr. Jarvis's last day will be on Friday with the town, and the staff and councillors will officially farewell him at that stage. But right now, on behalf of the councillors, the community and the staff, I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank you, Bob, for your dedication over the last 10 years and to wish both you and Liz well in your future endeavours.
Thank you.
And if you'd like to have the opportunity to say a few words, maybe we can give Bob a clap.
Thank you. I've written a few things down because it's very easy to miss people and they hit you on the head after. Thank you, Your Worship, for allowing me to say a few words. When you spend so much time in a role which is busy and carries much responsibility, you don't often get time to pause and reflect on what you've achieved. And I say we deliberately because local government is a team exercise involving staff and elected members in pursuit of the outcomes which have been embodied in the community's strategic plan. I've been privileged to work with a diverse group of councillors and a largely stable workforce who have provided drive and enthusiasm and helped to achieve so much, including significant change to the town's finances and development. Some of the most significant changes are not so obvious. For example, an increase in the number of dwellings in the town between 2009 and the 2016 census of 17% of additional dwellings, 999 additional dwellings in that period, and a further 204 dwellings have been added since 2016. The town's population has increased by 12.7% in that time. The town's rates have gone from $8.1 million a year to $13.1 million a year between 2009 and now, an increase of $5 million annually. And this has largely been driven by $423 million worth of building investment in the same period. The town's cash reserves have grown from only $643,000 in 2009 to $5.7 million in 2018. We've received $35 million worth of grants for the same period. $17,812,000 was expended on roads, paths and drainage infrastructure in that time. Replacement of the lighting in council buildings with LED and Old Perth Road street lighting also replaced with LED, and lighting in the library powered by solar power. There are many other stats, but this gives a snapshot of some of the changes. I would like to thank the directors of the town, Mike, Graham, Simon and Tony, and Brian Reid, who is also a member of the corporate management team, for their dedicated service and support. My EA Sue Perkins, who has kept me organised and sane for 9.5 years, and all of the staff, inside and outside, for their commitment. I mentioned earlier that I've served with a diverse number of councillors and they have all made their contribution to the success of the town, but I want to mention 3 elected members in particular who are with me for almost the entire time of my tenure. Jerry Pule and Anne Brinkworth to start with, who were fearless supporters of the staff and me, and are amongst the very best councillors I have served with, and my experience has been with 6 different local governments, for their love of their community and positive rather than negative approach to their role. And John Ganchel, who was the mayor for the majority of my tenure, and it was his vision and leadership which has been at the centre of much of it has been achieved. Alfresco dining, markets, movies and the revitalisation of the town centre were his pet projects and were fearlessly pursued. In a very short time, John developed, and I hope he just forgives me for this, from being an angry young man who quite frankly frightened the hell out of me when he was elected mayor, to an inspiring leader who steered the town through some difficult times, including 2 of the 3 attempts to amalgamate the town with Bayswater, and the Rolf Harris issue, where we had Al Jazeera even at the front door at 7 o'clock in the morning, all of which he handled with strength and resolve, and I think it has made the man. I have appreciated his support, his humour and his willingness to listen. I was not so keen on his TV career with Sweet and Sour and did my best to avoid the program. Thank you, John. I believe you grew into the role and guided much of the success of the town in the last 9.5 years. Thank you to the friends and colleagues I had the pleasure of working with, my family who have travelled from city to country to remote and back as a result of my career and provided unwavering support to me even when the times were challenging, and to the town for the opportunity to be its CEO. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
And John will hit me later.
Thank you. That was really great to hear some of the things. It's often, time
and
goes
of course,
by.
we can't forget my crowning glory.
Your crowning glory, yes, John.
Memorial and Gardens.
I did mention that, John.
Oh, did you? I just didn't hear it. I didn't ring loud enough.
Sorry, I'll try to speak up next time I mention it. Okay, so thank you. As I said, on Friday, any councillors who are available who aren't working, it'd be wonderful to have as many people as possible there to farewell Bob further. Item 3 on the agenda is attendances, apologies and applications for leave. I don't believe we have any apologies, but I would like to put an application for leave from November 12th to December 1st. Are there any other applications? Councillor Brown?
The application for leave for this Friday, the 19th,
Yep.
Certainly is.
until Sunday, the 21st. Please.
Anything further? Okay, we have a mover for Councillor Quinton, seconded Councillor Mikachuk. All those in favour? And that's passed unanimously. Sorry, I also failed to mention, obviously Bob is leaving us on Friday and we have Peter Mabb starting with us, and she's in attendance this evening. So welcome, Peter. It's lovely to have you here and we look forward to getting to know you more over the coming months. Okay, item 4, declarations of interest. Does anybody have an interest to declare? I would like to declare an interest in item 6.1, an impartiality interest. My daughter attends Eden Hill Primary School, and as many of the submissions are from parents of Eden Hill, the PNC and the board, I'd like to declare an interest there. Item 5 is deputations. We've not had any requests for deputations, so we'll move on to item 6, which is the reports. The first one being 6.1, which is the Responsible Authority report for the Vibe petrol station application. Before we begin, Christian Buttle, I believe you produced this report, is that correct? I'd just like to thank you for the report. I've had some feedback from the community members. Obviously there's been a lot of interest. We saw, I think it was 131 submissions from community members on this topic. And I've had several people approach me and say that they were really impressed with your report and how easy it was to read and the information provided, so thank you so much for that. There are obviously a lot of people in the community who are interested in the outcome of tonight's decision and recommendation to the JDAP, but just to remind people that this application will be determined by the JDAP and that tonight's decision is merely a recommendation from Council, and that the decision will be made at the JDAP meeting on the 31st of October. So are there questions from councillors in relation to this item for the staff? Councillor Hamilton?
Thank you. On page 26 of the agenda, down the bottom, you've got the change of road design as proposed in the motion proposed by my colleague, Councillor Quinton. You've indicated on the next page that that change has been endorsed by Council as its official position. Drawings have not yet been prepared for the road changes that would result, and accordingly this matter is seen as being too early in the process to be used as a factor in decision making for the current application. I'm curious about that because obviously if this petrol station convenience store went ahead, it would actually inhibit our ability to create that road change. So I'm curious about why it has such a minimal or no implication in this decision-making process of JDAP.
Mr. Buttle?
Thank you, through the chair. In simple terms, the proposal for the road is just too early from a planning perspective to be taken into consideration. For a matter to be given weight in planning decision making, the proposal has to be formulated. It has to have gone through public consultation. The plans would have to have been prepared, and ultimately the proposed change would have to be what would be considered to be certain and imminent. And with respect to all of those considerations, the proposal at this point in time, it doesn't stack up against those matters. So, albeit that this is a change that may eventuate down the track, if the development were to be approved, that wouldn't necessarily mean that the proposed change to the road design could not go ahead. It would just mean that at that particular location, there would have to be consideration to the specific design characteristics of the road at that point.
Okay.
While you're standing, I have a question as well. So in the applicant's report, I think it's on page 18, they acknowledge the need for a site-specific study in regards to not having the 50-metre buffer zone. Have they given an explanation why they have not provided such a study?
There's been no advice from the applicant as to why a study of that kind has not been provided, no.
Okay, thank you. Are there further questions? Okay, so we have a recommendation from the staff before us, which is to endorse the Senior Planning Officer's Form 1 Responsible Authority Report, which is recommending refusal of the application. Do we have a mover for the officer recommendation? Councillor Gangel, seconder, Councillor Hamilton. Is there anybody against? All those in favour? That's passed unanimously. So as I said, that will be going before the Metro Central Joint Development Assessment Panel on the 31st of October at 4 p.m. So that will be held in this building here. And I believe that any community members who've made submissions will be notified of the date, will they, and the procedure for them to give a deputation if they so wish at that meeting?
Thank you. All of the community members who made a submission on the application have been provided with communication that gave them details of the meeting tonight, and also subsequent meeting details in relation to the JDAP meeting, so that information has already gone out.
Thank you for doing that, but can I just clarify, in terms of them needing to provide advice in writing to the Secretariat in advance of the meeting, they were given those instructions as well?
The information that's gone out to them has given them a link to the form for making a deputation, and the need for that form to be provided 3 days in advance of the meeting. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to item 6.2. This is the one, sorry, thank you, Tony. Design. So as councils would be aware, at the September meeting we had designs come before us. We've subsequently had a workshop where there have been some changes made as a result of that. Mr. Stuart Dawkins, would you mind just giving us a brief rundown of the meeting and what changes have been made and which changes have been noted but not necessarily reflected on these particular plans?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, that would. Yes, there was a councillor workshop held on the 9th of October, and that's attached to this evening's agenda. At the back of the agenda, along with a plan which illustrates the changes that have been made. So there was consensus amongst the councillors at the meeting in regards to a number of changes, and those have been reflected in the drawings. So just going through those. The toilets were amended to provide in the male and female toilets, to provide both an adult and a child seated toilet, and also to provide change tables and wash basins to facilitate easy access for people with prams to use that space. And the toilets were also reconfigured so that the plumbing was more effective in regards to trying to save some costs in regards to the future. The waiting area, there was changes made to that space. There was a request to have a curtain or thermal curtain to be installed. That is illustrated on the drawing, and also to change it from lounge chairs to a lounge chair within the space, and also to provide a carpeted area within that waiting space. The driveway, that was amended. The driveway originally went all the way up to the studio space at the rear of the lot. So it's been the actual driveway has been reduced down to just to the entry point of the residence, and then from in front of the residence, there's a path which has been provided. The report indicates, the officer's report indicates that that path has to comply with universal access requirements, and so it has to be a minimum of 1.5 metres in width. The report does say that it's preferable to be 1.8, but the path is actually illustrated as 1.5. And there was also a request to have gates at that point adjacent to the kitchen area, and so a gate has been provided at that point, so that the rear part of the garden can be isolated. There was also a suggestion, which obviously the drawings can't illustrate, but there was a suggestion to look at subsurface treatment to a landscaped area where the driveway once was. That hasn't been shown on the drawing, but officers would pick that up as part of the landscape process. There's a hyperlink to an example of what the council was talking, or the elected members were talking about. My understanding of that intention was that in the future it could be trafficable, but the area is intended to be grassed. The doors from rooms 2 and 3 are to be locked from within the new residence. Sorry, the new community space side, and not from the other side, so that there's a capacity to isolate that space. CCTV, obviously we talked about that as well. We did say that CCTV is already included in the facility, but there was specific request that the community space, around the community space and the clinics be considered. I would not think there would be CCTV inside the clinics because there would be privacy issues, but around the space I think that would be quite appropriate. And there was requests made in regards to the landscaping in front of the actual cottage, asking for that the amount of paving there to be looked at to see whether they can make it a softer type of landscaping. That hasn't been illustrated again because it's difficult, because we haven't engaged a landscape architect or landscape designer at this stage. The town does refer to a document that was produced a number of years ago by Dr. Brian Shepherd, which talked about the different types of landscape treatments that should be provided for the residents and the actual pensioner guard cottage. For example, in front of the pensioner guard cottage, it talked about trying to provide vegetables and those type of things. When we were speaking to the landscape architect or designer initially, we did say, look, vegetables are difficult for staff to maintain, but so what the plan does illustrate, or what the landscape plan currently illustrates, is providing herbs and those type of things, which could be seen as demonstrating what the space could have been used for in the past. And so, based on that information which council provided at that workshop, staff would go away and, if council's endorsed this plan, would then go away and engage the landscape designer to come back and look at the current drawings to refine the landscaping for both the area in front of the garage space and the area in front of the cottage.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you as well for organising the workshop and amended plans in such a short time frame. I know that was very tight for you, so thank you for your efforts.
My pleasure.
Okay. Questions? Councillor Mikachuk.
Yeah, through the chair. One of the last things I think was mentioned just as the meeting was finishing up were the eyelash verandas, and Councillor Hamilton did mention to the consultant that they deviated a little bit from the heritage, but Sasha explained that this was for the structural integrity.
Yes.
He did say then that it was for the structural integrity, but he wasn't sure if that was still required, and my understanding was from the meeting that he would clarify whether that was still the case. I'm just wondering if he communicated any further about that.
Yes, through the chair. Yes, he did communicate that, and actually for the councillors' information, I do have some images of what the cottage looked like back in, well, that's courtesy of the Batty Library, but what the original cottage looked like before the residence was constructed, and I can pass those around. And there was discussions at a 19th of July 2016 steering group meeting where this very issue came up, and Dr. Fiona Bush, who is the heritage consultant who did all the investigations and the research to actually find some of these images, she worked with the SIA architects, and there was a recommendation that because when the residence was constructed, the gables were reduced in width, because that was the only way they could do that to retain the existing cottage. And so what was agreed to at that 19th of July meeting was that the existing gables would be extended slightly, because at the moment they're flush with the actual building, so they would be extended slightly, and the veranda, the eyelash veranda around there would be have a rafter underneath it to support it. They did look at the options of a corrugated iron not being supported, and it was just hanging free and just being attached to veranda posts, but the structural engineer has indicated that wouldn't be appropriate for today's building standards, and that a rafter should be placed underneath it. So the drawings reflect the original design of being a concave or eyelash type of veranda, but it does have a rafter underneath it to support it, to ensure that it doesn't get blown away or doesn't collapse in the future.
Okay, thank you. And just to clarify, so the consultant since our last workshop didn't pass on any further information regarding verandas or?
Look, I've got the information here, which I can provide to councillors. I can send it around.
Yeah. No, I was just.
I have that here. I do have
information.
the drawings here if you'd like to look at those.
Okay. Thank you. That'd be good to see. And just a point of clarity, my understanding was also in regards to the front garden, and please, councillors, correct me if it doesn't correctly reflect what we said. It's just a subtlety, but my understanding wasn't that we would try to make it more green, that the majority view was that we would remove most of the paving and have a green type cottage space. I'm happy to be corrected on that if that wasn't.
I think Mr. Stewart-Dawkins said that that's going to be addressed with the landscaping plan.
So yes, it would be addressed with the landscaping plan, but at the same time there has to be consideration for people who require universal access.
So that's not what I'm happy and understand that that's required. It was just more a subtlety in the wording that my feeling was it was council's majority view that it would be re-landscaped to be much softer.
So sorry to cut you off. Mr. Stewart-Dawkins and I had a discussion today about the fact that these plans we have before us are purely for the construction of the building, and I think there's an awareness that councillors would like to have the opportunity to have input into the landscaping. So again, correct me if I'm wrong, but the intention would be to bring that back for us to see prior to there being any decisions made.
Yes, I'm happy for those plans to be refined and to be brought back to council for consideration, or to a workshop, or whatever you'd like to do.
Yeah, and thank you for clarifying that. That just gives confidence in today's decision making about what is final and what has scope for further refining. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton?
Further to that point, because it was me that brought up the need for softening the hard surfaces in the property. The reason I brought that up is because from a historical context, because this is primarily a project to restore the historical buildings at the front, obviously so many hard surfaces wouldn't normally be a part and parcel of the historical context. I understand the need for universal access, and certainly there have been attempts to include universal access, but what I would like to seek from the officer is some assurance that, you know, the conversation we had during the workshop was that we would soften the landscape from the end of the driveway, which is opposite the existing residence entry, all the way back to the double doors of the multifunction place. However, on the plans that I see at the back of the attachments, there's very little soft surfaces. I mean, it looks like paving in some of the areas as well, extensive paving. So
Councillor Hamilton, what assurance are you seeking at this point in time?
I'm concerned that we are still going down the path of a lot of hard surfaces in an area where historically there would never have been any hard surfaces like that at all. So I know that we're going to get a landscaping plan, but the landscaping plan might be just for these very small areas that you've delineated now on the plans, as opposed to the intent of why I brought it up at the workshop.
Okay, so I'm referring back to the actual meeting notes and the consensus of the elected members there, which was that the paving after the entry point was to be amended to reflect a universal and accessible path to lead visitors to the double doors. So I think my understanding at that workshop is that elected members looking for a narrow path which could potentially Miranda down to that space. But we're not able to do that because of the universal access requirements. So we have to comply with that because we're doing a renovation to a building, and it needs to. It's not a residential property like for you or for myself. It has to be. It's a public accessible building, so it has to be a minimum of 1.5 metres in width. We can't go any narrower than that because then it wouldn't be compliant. So that's why the path currently illustrates that capacity. So we've tried to achieve as much as possible what you're asking for.
So thank you for that, and I think we appreciate the need to comply with all of those requirements. In terms of us having the landscaping plan come back to council, I guess, would it satisfy you, Councillor Hamilton, if in that discussion we're having a look at not just the garden beds that are identified on this plan, but potentially how some of those areas could be made softer and greener instead of just addressing the garden beds? Would that be possible?
Yes. So, are you looking at, say, for example, in front of the cottage? You're looking at there's the paved areas. So you're looking at the garden beds. I'm just not clear as to what you want to do with those garden beds. I mean, there are already garden beds there.
No, I guess, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. I guess Councillor Hamilton is raising her concerns that potentially there's more areas that could have reduced hard surfaces.
Yes.
I don't think tonight that's not what we're making a decision about,
No.
but it's just being flagged that there is a desire to try and have as much of a green space as possible, and that there's scope to have further discussion around whether all of those hard surfaces are necessary.
That's fine.
Does that satisfy you, Councillor Hamilton, if we include that?
Thank you.
Yes.
Did you have a question, Councillor Quinton?
Yes. Yes, stay standing. Sorry, I should have raised this at the workshop, but I know this is my last chance. There's no door going out from the community kitchen into the community space, and given this is going to be a space where mums will be needing to warm up bottles and clean things and make food and use the kitchen quite a lot, they're going to have to enter in through the waiting room and then from the waiting room into the kitchen. So they have to go through 2 doors in order to get into the kitchen. Would it not make more sense to have the door on the other side, remove the bifold door and just turn it into a swinging door, and then move the fridge over onto the other side? It just makes more sense for the flow and use of the building to have a door open out onto the kitchen space.
Sorry, when you say open out onto the kitchen space, you're saying open out onto the community space. Yeah.
Conversely, if the door opens in that direction, it would then limit the opportunity for the residents when they wanted to use the kitchen. So the doorway in the community kitchen has been, and the doorway for that has been put in a central location, so it's accessible for both the users of the community space, the users of the residents, and the users of the clinic. There was originally in the original drawing, which was previously approved by council, there was a servery which went from the kitchen into that space. That servery was taken out, I think, as a way of accommodating everything else that's kind of just recently happened. So, I mean, we could go back to the architect and say, look, we'd like that servery to be reinstalled again. So, because you've got a servery on the which is providing servery to the access way between the residents and the community space, and you could put a very small servery between the kitchen and the community space, which would help future users of those spaces.
So just to clarify, if, as Councillor Quinton was proposing, the doorway was moved from where it currently is located onto the clinic waiting room and onto the community meeting space, the only entrance to that kitchen then for people who are using the interpretive centre would have to be going through the waiting room through the community meeting space.
No, that's not what I'm suggesting at all.
No.
I know we're not in debate.
No.
What I'm suggesting is that we replace the bifold door just with a normal door.
It's a bifold window.
Bifold window.
Sorry, Councillor Quinton, which one are you referring to? You talked
so
about
the door that comes
servery.
out onto the residence.
So
not
adjacent to the thermal curtain.
Yeah.
Excuse me. May I
so
just
that's
walk,
not a door.
May I just walk over
Yeah,
and
sure.
see what?
That's a servery
Yeah, that's
sign,
not a
it's not a door, is that right?
No,
It's a servery
Right, does
window.
it? Yes.
It's a servery window.
Servery
Yeah.
bifold.
Yeah, I
but it's not an
understand.
entrance point.
I understand, but in
It's a servery, yes.
Yeah, I understand. But could it not be turned into a door? Does it have to be a servery?
Oh, okay.
Well, that's not a door, I think that's a servery.
It could be a doorway. Yeah, I suppose that's what.
That would still provide access
Yes.
from here to
Yes.
there,
What's the
and then
servery?
provide access
No,
from
that's
there,
the
because this
servery.
is taking up quite a lot of that wall space,
Mhm.
and that's the size of a doorway.
Mhm.
That it could just be that, which means the fridge can come here,
Yes.
and that becomes a door.
Yes. So.
Is that possible?
Yes, of course, that's
Okay.
possible if you'd like to do that. Yes.
Sorry, I should have brought it up at the workshop.
Okay, so maybe everybody else can have an explanation of what was proposed then?
Just, I may. So the proposal was that this is currently this servery door, servery counter be altered from a servery counter to a doorway, and that current door to be closed off. And were you looking at having a servery on the other side?
No, a door.
And a doorway on the other side as well?
Yeah.
So two doors?
Yeah.
And
well,
a servery?
No servery.
So basically a door there and a door that side?
Well, you need a door going out onto the community space, and if you want to have access, I mean, you could have a servery and shorten the size of it, I suppose, and have a roller door come down instead of a bifold door.
I suppose the only comment I would make is that if the kitchen would then potentially be a walkway, and from an health perspective, it could be problematic with people walking through.
All right. In that case, can we just shorten the size of the servery to half, just enough room to move the fridge over to that space?
Okay. This is really quite difficult because nobody else.
Can I make a suggestion?
What's your suggestion, Councillor Brown?
Well, it's not ergonomic. There's an ergonomic issue. The servery.
I thought you were going to make a suggestion about process. Do you mind just waiting until we've finished?
What I'm going to suggest is we go back, because there's been changes here. There's been no changes to the kitchen. It needs to go back to the architect and make it suitable for purpose.
Councillor Brown, the problem is that we're at the point where we need to endorse some plans so that we can move forward and get this project moving before we jeopardise our Lottery West funding. So it's already come back a number of times, so we need to make a decision.
We need to endorse it by next council meeting or tonight?
Well, that's a decision for council to make. All I'm saying is, in terms of going back to the architect again, we need to be mindful of the time factor. So can we just go back to Councillor Quinton so that she can finish what she was saying?
No, that's all I was going to say. And I recognise that's why I think a door is a better place on that side rather than a servery, so that people from the residents don't have to go through the waiting room into the community space. But conversely, people have to go from the community space into the waiting room and then into the kitchen. It just doesn't seem to be a natural use of the kitchen, because there are going to be more community members using the community space rather than the residents. So for the very few people that will be using the residents and then need to use the kitchen, we are compromising the use of the space for the majority of people who will be using the community space.
Councillor Hamilton?
I know we're not in debate, but I'm just trying to get a
So questions for the staff at the moment. Yeah, Councillor Hamilton?
Okay, well, if you keep the servery window, I should like to point out that you have double glass doors that open out straight into that servery window. So I think that is...
Is it a question, Councillor?
I'm asking if that's appropriate, because I'm thinking that that's probably going to be a problem anyway. So I take Councillor Quinton's point that corner is already a problem because you've got double glass doors that open straight out into a servery counter.
Councillor Hamilton, can you please phrase your question?
Yeah, so I think that corner needs reworking anyway.
Is it a question?
Yeah. Would you agree with that?
So the question is it possible for the double doors to be moved, which is currently on the south side of that,
over to the residence
over to the north side,
yes.
and for both banks of glass doors to be moved over?
Yeah.
Yes, it is possible.
Okay. So the other question I've got then is, if that happens, then it's possible to move the servery window, the bifold window, down a little bit more towards the eastern wall, which would allow a doorway to fit into that area. Do you want me to show you?
Yes, thank you.
And then after that, Councillor Mikachuk, are you trying to move a motion?
Potentially. I just want to highlight something as a process-wise, given the time and the way we proceed from here, which I'm sure you're aware of. Yeah, okay.
Follow on
Me
from
too,
that.
yeah.
Okay, so following on from that, so you agree with that, Simon, that could possibly happen?
Look, obviously it looks as if it's feasible, but I'd need to speak to the architect.
Are we now talking about moving the doors? Is that what you're
so
speaking about?
The next proposal is that there's, where currently it shows that there's a thermal curtain, which is in a kind of a cupboard.
Yep.
In that space there would be a door which would open into the kitchen, and where the current servery is, it would be made to be slightly smaller.
Can I suggest, councillors, if there's any, we have some councillors want to move the officer recommendation, I believe.
No, I'd like to move alternative motion.
Hold on. So there's obviously some things that people want to address. Can we maybe move through those individually, and if they get support, we can ask questions if they've got support, and otherwise we can just move on.
So, Madam Mayor, can I just finish that one topic there because it flows on from
last one, Councillor Hamilton.
So my question is then, that provides access to the kitchen via the dividing veranda between the residents and the community centre. Would that not then enable, instead of people going through that waiting room, would that not enable people to access that kitchen both from the residents, the pensioner guard cottage and the community space? They could actually come out these doors and just around there. I'm not sure whether that would have solved the problems.
Okay. Councillor McKittrick, did you have a question?
I do want to move a motion when at some point.
Have you got a question?
The officer's recommendation.
I have a similar time to everybody else, thank you.
Similar time to everybody else?
Listen, I have a slight advantage. I've recently designed and built my own 5x4 two-storey bedroom home. This design is a design that was in a previous manifestation of this before these other changes were made. It is not ergonomically accurate. You have a community meeting space in here.
Councillor Brown, I don't mean to cut you off, but can we stick...
So the question is, because it's a minor design change, is it possible to get the architect to look at this now through a new lens in consideration of those previous changes, or recent changes? Is that possible? Without causing delay?
Through the chair, I suppose the workshop held on the 9th of October was to address all those issues, and there was consensus made at that particular meeting in regards to the changes that were made. So
I'll point out that this wasn't available to us then, and this new manifestation wasn't available to us then.
So Councillor Brown, this is a reflection. This is a reflection of the discussions from that workshop.
Yeah. We now have a new design that actually demonstrates it's not ergonomically not ergonomically efficient.
So the plan...
You've got a meeting space here. People have got to come through around to a...
So Councillor Brown, sorry, can I cut you off? If you're not satisfied, then I'm not sure the staff can answer at this point. It would be council making a decision that you don't want to accept these plans at this point.
Between now and council meeting, can Sasha, our architect, have a look at that, considering those changes that we now have before us, and see if it can be made more ergonomically efficient.
So it's the question in the next week, before the council meeting next week?
With the program, this can be done in 20 minutes.
I can't answer that. I did speak to Sasha today. He's back in Sydney again at his office in Sydney. So I'd have to call him tomorrow to ask.
Okay. Councillor Ganjel.
Thank you, Your Worship. Given the stated time at this present moment in time, I believe the option available to Council, considering we are required to start a briefing session at 7 p.m, is to defer this item now, because we won't be able to debate it within the required timeframes for debate to take place to after the briefing session
So
tonight.
I think Councillor Ganjel is moving a deferral motion to the ordinary council meeting next week. Is that correct?
No, we can continue this discussion at the conclusion of the briefing session, which we're required to start at 7 p.m.
So just to clarify, are you proposing a discussion or a continuation of the meeting?
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. Good point. Continuation of the meeting, Your Worship. So the meeting being... Yep.
Okay, so we've got a secondary, Councillor Hamilton. Anybody against? All those in favour? That's passed unanimously. Okay, so that moves us on to item 5, which is closure. So I'll close the meeting, and we have a few minutes between now and 7 p.m. when the briefing session will commence. Thank you, everyone.
Check their sausage roll.
Okay.